Hello, Pankeris. Ninth and the 10th. We came down to Cornwall to visit my granny. I think it was over the winter sometime. Came down for Christmas or something like that. And we sat down and offered Henry a whiskey. I think in those days you were allowed to drink and drive in those days. And I had a little chat with Henry and realised that poor Michael was looking for a job and hadn't got one. And he said he was looking for an assistant and hadn't got one, and why don't you come and help me? So, just like that, Michael came to St Agnes to work for Dr. Whitworth, Dr. Henry Whitworth, but he came as a trainee assistant. It meant very, very little money. And there was an old B&B sign up on the house we were renting. And somebody walked in one day and said, you know, had we got a room? But I'd never thought about doing bed and breakfast in my life. I'd lived in Cornwall, but it never crossed my mind. But I had an empty room, and the children were away or something. And I said, well, yes, I could take you for bed and breakfast. He came in and gave him bed. I thought, well, that was quite pleasant. You're working in your own home, and I'd cooked him a lovely breakfast, and he was thrilled to bits and all the rest of it. And that's how it started, in such a strange sort of way. And we bought this house. We were in renting, but then when Michael was made a partner, we bought this house. It wasn't a chore of a misery at all to do bed and breakfast, and you know, it's just worked on from there. That was my favourite little baby deer. It's a black buck, and I think its mother had been shot, and they brought it to me, and that was my pet, and I loved it very much. And it fell in a lime pit. It was still quite young, and it died, and I was heartbroken. So they had him done like this for me, and I used to sort of pat it and kiss it goodnight, just like a cuddly toy. So people think it's a hunting trophy or something, but it's certainly not a hunting trophy. That was my pet, Bucky. I called it Bucky. I still call it Bucky.
And this was in India?
In India, yes.
So it came back on the ship?
It came back on the ship. We brought it back with us from India. That's part of my early life.
Knowing house.
That's it. Down here. Knowing house. And that's where John Opie they used to hang out, I think.
Oh, yeah.
There we are. There's it. But through the Tonkins that we're related. My great-grandmother, going back, you know, I've got a picture of her at home. My great-grandmother was a Tonkin. John Opie's mother was a Tonkin. It's a somewhat tenuous relationship. He was very famous in the end, and it's nice to say this is a relative of mine.
Absolutely.
Personally, I think you know that Gainsborough and all these famous people. I think John Opie's portraits were on a par with theirs. They're beautiful, beautiful portraits.
Hello. Hello. Yes, hello.
Film your cottage.
Yes,
Oh, really?
Yes.
My granny's.
There's a picture of you aged 3 in front of an old car.
Oh, that's right.
Yes,
nice
taken in
picture, that,
yes,
isn't it?
yes, absolutely.
Yes, oh, that's lovely. But there's a lovely picture of Granny in front of, with her shop front saying Rogers.
Yes, yes.
That's my mother there, at the gate.
Here?
That's my
Oh, how amazing.
mother.
Oh, yes, you have to have a picture in exactly the same spot.
Yes,
Granny had a wonderful shop. All those lovely sweets, you know, pear drops, humbugs, and all those sacks of grain and rice and flour, big lumps of tobacco, and she'd weigh out the sweets, and she'd weigh out the tobacco, and she'd weigh out the rice. Nothing in package. Those in. Well, Yes, my poor mother got a scholarship to Camborne County School, you see, from the little school up here, which was lovely. I mean, and she used to go and catch the train, little halt here, go to Camborne, go to school, and she had an hour to wait. So somebody would come in the shop and ask for something. Granny said, I haven't got it now. Get it by 5 o'clock tomorrow. So my mother used to go straight from school into the shops in Camborne, buy whatever it was Granny wanted, and bring them all home on the train, and then Granny would sell them on, you know. And my mother said, you should see me going home from school with a great basket of stuff. And then anything that my mother couldn't pick up in Camborne, Granny knew all about mail orders, and she used to go across the post office over there to Mrs. O'Leary's and fill in a mail order form and get it, because a lot of people couldn't read or write, you know. Granny had these clever children with scholarships and everything. They could do all that for her, and she'd get anything anybody wanted, mail order. And I used to live up there. There's nothing much to see up there either. Terrible place to go. But we moved and lived in Perranporth.
Is this a club you remember of, Dorothy?
Winston Graham used to play. He was a wonderful tennis player, and I remember him playing singles with Dr. Fuller. We used to stand and admire him. I didn't play with him. I wasn't in the same league. My tennis isn't wonderful, but I spent hours of my life playing tennis on these courts. Don't think it's going to be very photogenic, I'm afraid.
But is this the house that,
Yes.
that Winston Graham lived in?
Yes, yes.
Well, we worship at the shrine of Poldark.
Yes. Goodness me.
But then why would it be a beautiful house, really? You know, I mean, he wasn't a rich
Oh, not
man
in those
at
days.
all. But no blue plaque.
No, so I was thinking that. During my grandmother's lifetime, she saw the mines closing. And of course, 2 of her sons were mining, and the mines closed, and they emigrated. My great-grandmother gave up her cottage. You know, she had a cottage. Her husband died in his 40s, I think it was. She was left with 7 children. Luckily, 2 of her boys went and worked on farms, but 2 of these boys went mining, and the mines closed, and they emigrated to America, and she never heard from them again, and apparently it nearly broke her heart. I think we can climb a gate like this. This isn't too difficult. Goodness, even I could climb a gate like that. See?
Is that recommended at 92?
Oh, good, I'm glad. I'm glad I haven't got to climb over the gate.
Perhaps on the way back. And this is your great-grandfather
On my mother's
on
side.
your mother's side.
Down a ladder, they didn't have cages or anything like that in these. Down a ladder, and then you had to walk to the face, and then it's granite. You're there with a pickaxe and dynamite, you know, sort of hacking away at the granite, and then sort of to come all the way back up the ladder, walk home. And they've got these lovely stories about these pasties, you know, they used to take to work with apple at one end and meat and potato the other, these gorgeous stories. But they were very poor. They didn't even have ovens. They didn't cook themselves pasties, not the ordinary miners, and they used to take a piece of turnip very often. Turnip seemed to be one of the things they used to eat. You cut, you know, a great big piece of turnip and eat it. That was. And they didn't have ovens in the cottages. They used to boil things up, and I think some
This is
of...
cooked turnip. Not
No, raw turnip. Oh, good heavens, no, not cooked turnip. Goodness, no. And stale bread seemed to be the staple diet, but pouring boiling water on stale bread, but putting a bit of something in to make it a bit tasty, a bit of butter if you could, and salt and pepper. And I remember butter broth we used to have it. And I think one of the big gardens was trying to reconstruct this, you know, water on stale bread. They called it killie something broth, I think. But that's what they ate a lot of. I believe they learned when they were digging the canals, you know, when we had building these great canals and they had navies in, that the men were much better if they drank beer than if they drank water, because beer's got these trace elements, barley and hops, and there are some good trace elements in beer, but that they don't get these trace elements in water. And of course, this particular grandfather was a friend of Billy Bray, the temperance.
And do you know what your great-great-grandfather did here?
Oh, just an ordinary commoner garden miner.
Oh, okay.
I didn't do anything,
Okay.
just hacking away with a
Hacking
pickaxe.
away with a pickaxe, all right.
But he died very young, and
As everybody did.
they all did.
Yes.
Well, there was no life, was it? You haven't got enough to eat, and no trace elements.
No trace elements, no.
Handrails are wonderful things for elderly people, you know. They don't realise what you can do with a handrail.
This is beautiful here, isn't it?
They're wonderfully built. They're wonderfully built. It's amazing. My granny was still in Midian, of course, when we came back, and then my father bought property in Perranporth. I lived in Perranporth, and as I said, the Winston Graham connection, and then I went to Truro High School, and actually I was a boarder at Truro High School, Rashleigh, Darwini, and all that.
You were always determined to go to university?
Well, no, not really. No, I took the very first biology school certificate, and they'd be doing botany in the bad old days, good old days, zoology, but biology came in 1940, and I took school certificate in 1940. It was the very first biology, and I got a distinction, and that sort of, set me on the biological trail, but it wasn't an acceptable subject. I had to end up doing botany and zoology, and you couldn't take a biology degree. I ended up taking a botany degree. I got into Westfield College, London. Only just scraped it in. Quite happy though, but it was nice. Westfield College, London was evacuated to St. Peter's Hall in Oxford. We were at St. Peter's Hall, Newgate Hall Street, Oxford. And we went to the London botany lectures, but funnily enough we went to the Oxford zoology lectures, and I was there just during the war, but the war, we had 2 years in Oxford, then the war ended, and I had 1 year in London, but I was offered a research job. I ended up getting really good marks, and it's a terrible thing to say. I don't think they really liked me doing well, because I was the one who just scraped in, but because I thought I wasn't all that wonderful, and I repeated the whole of the third year, which the others didn't, I ended up doing better than they did. Fleming came to visit us, and it was a big thing, but Professor Flory, I worked at the Sir William Dunn School of Pathology in Oxford, and Flory was the one who got penicillin going. The Oxford team, the books that I've got all about it. Fleming discovered it, and he did some good work, but that was in 1928. But he just left it then, and when the Oxford team were looking for something to do with the pathogen, they decided to do penicillin, and they worked on it. They were the ones that produced it, and gave it to the world, if you like. But in the end, they had to go to America to have it produced commercially, because there wasn't anybody in England who could do it. There was a war on and all the rest of it. And anyway, they produced penicillin so it could be used on wounds in the war, the 1939 war.
And that presumably was the big push to...
Yeah, and Fleming took a bit of interest, Fleming was the one who discovered it and did the initial work. He discovered that it was active against the staphylococcus, and that it was he more or less discovered it was non-toxic, which was good. I think he injected it into a mouse or something. But that was it, you know, he did sort of, you know, one mouse, one rabbit sort of thing, and left it. But he wrote it up as a paper, and they used it. It was strange thing. They used it in media to stop the bugs growing when they were trying to grow a particular bug. It's strange to think they weren't using it as a medicinal at all in there. But Florey just read the paper of Fleming's. They did all the work. They produced penicillin at the Sir William Dunn School of Pathology in Oxford, which is where I was working, still looking for new antibiotics. This is the book that they produced in the Path Lab on antibiotics, and I think it would pay everybody, all the people who are still looking for antibiotics, to read this book. That's Fleming's original plate. And this is some of the work that I was doing. You can see you grow the fungus in the middle and you streak bacteria up to it. That's Alexander Fleming, and that's me.
Okay. And who's the other chap?
That was Dr. Campbell. He was my boss at Glaxo, and that's Chris Bessel, she's called. I was working with her. And I had a Coprinus. It was called Coprinus quadrifidus, I remember, that was producing a very good antibiotic. And I grew it in a large scale, and the mouse died that they tried it on. And I have a feeling that batch might have been contaminated. All my life I've been worrying. I don't think I've heard any work on basidiomycetes, which is mushrooms, and to the world in general, toadstools, but there's a whole lot in that book, results of testing basidiomycetes, and these fungi, ink cap, mine was quadrant, it was an ink cap, and it was producing quite a lot of quite strong antibiotic, and it haunts me. I think, I hope that batch wasn't contaminated. I'm sure it wasn't toxic. I think it must have got a contaminant in, and I'd still like to go back to the lab and have another go at it after all these years.
I think you should look again at the antibiotic that got away.
Yeah, I think I should
I think
too,
you should.
yes. Pity I can't just grow it here.